What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with my review of the TCL 30Z. So without further ado, let's get started. Now this device is definitely meant to be a very entry-level smartphone. In fact, you can get it at Cricket Wireless for just $29.99. And in addition to Cricket, this phone's also offered a TracFone and some of the various brands under TracFone. So with this phone, you certainly shouldn't expect too much, but at the same time, it still can accomplish some of the more basic tasks that you'd expect from a smartphone, such as phone calls, text messages, occasional photos, and also very light social media usage. Now, if you are somebody that spends a lot of time on your device, then I think you'll definitely be disappointed with this phone, considering that it's not very powerful, and it also doesn't have too many features. But I'm going to be going over all of that throughout this video. Now, for full disclosure, TCL was kind enough to send this phone out to me to cover here on the channel. That being said though, all opinions expressed in this video are completely my own. Now with the TCL 30Z, we have a pretty large display at 6.1 inches. Now I remember it wasn't too long ago that if you wanted to go for a very low-end smartphone, you'd have to make a compromise by getting a phone with a very small display. But nowadays, it doesn't really matter if you're going for a more expensive phone or a cheaper one like this one, you do tend to get pretty large displays. Now that especially does come in handy for watching video content, and when you're on social media, things are going to be a bit easier to read here, and I guess that also applies to text messages for that matter. So pretty much anything involving the phone is a bit easier when the display is larger versus some of the older Android devices where you'd get a very small display. Now the display that we're getting here is LCD, it's 720p, we're getting a PPI of 282, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. Now one thing that I did notice with this device compared to some of its more expensive counterparts is that this display doesn't really get that bright. So especially if you're in an outdoor environment, you probably will notice pretty quickly that it will be difficult to look at the display of the phone. But if you're indoors or just in a shaded area, you should at least be able to use the device and see everything, but just keep in mind that the display doesn't get quite as bright here as it does with other phones. Now in addition to that, we have a water drop notch up here, which features a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. Now stay tuned for later on in the video, as I'll be showing you a variety of different image samples from both cameras on this device. But also this phone does have a thicker bottom bezel, so it doesn't necessarily have the most modern or highest end design to it, but at the same time, it is designed to be a pretty practical device. Now this phone features 32 gigabytes of internal storage, and in addition to that, it does support microSD card expansion. And I'll show you later on how to access the microSD card slot and the SIM card slot. Now this phone does not feature wireless charging, which is a bit disappointing, but at the same time a feature I wouldn't expect from a phone this low end, but there's also no fingerprint sensor to be found. Fortunately though, the phone does have face unlock, which I'll demonstrate right now. And it's kind of difficult, there we go, it's kind of difficult to do when I'm recording the phone with my camera here. We'll try it one more time. So face unlock is pretty fast and responsive, and it does work well. Now of course I would have wished that we also got a fingerprint sensor, but at least the face unlock actually works. Now this phone only has one camera, and it is an 8 megapixel camera, and there is no portrait mode supported for the rear camera, so only portrait mode for the front camera. Here's how things look on the camera app on the device. So this is of course with the main camera on the rear, considering that there is just one camera there. We can then flip around to the front-facing camera, and there's me. We can head over to portrait mode and get those nice blurred out backgrounds from the front camera. There's also panoramic, and there is video mode, of course. This phone does support 1080p video recording with both the rear and front cameras, which is pretty impressive for a lower-end phone. And then we can go over to the menu here and access a few other features, such as stop motion and light trace. But for the most part, you're not getting too many different features involving the cameras, as there really aren't that many cameras on this phone compared to other phones that might have an ultra-wide angle camera or a macro camera as well, so we are missing out on some of those. Now this device features 3 gigabytes of RAM paired up with the MediaTek Helio A22 processor. Now I have reviewed a variety of different phones on this channel over the years with that same processor, and it's definitely not very fast. In addition to that, as you might have expected, this phone does not support 5G connectivity. And while that's certainly something that you can live without in 2022, I feel like if you're going to go through the effort of buying a brand new smartphone, you might as well get one that does work with your carrier's latest and greatest network. Now I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 5, and here are the scores that I got from that test. So I got a single core score of 166, and a multi-core score of 576. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of how the TCL 30Z compares to your current smartphone. Because there's certainly a possibility that this phone could be slower than what you currently have. But I pretty much already outlined the general usability of this device given the specifications that it does have. Like I said, don't expect to do too much with this phone. Of course, it does feature the full Android operating system, but at the same time, many tasks that you're used to doing are going to run very slowly on this device. Now, this phone features a 3000 milliamp hour battery, but what's interesting is it features a removable battery. It's very rare to find smartphones that feature a removable battery, so it is cool to see that this phone does have one. And I'll access that battery slot in a second here. But as far as the software goes, we have Android 12, and it does feature TCL's own skin on here, so it's pretty much giving us the best aspects of stock Android, but at the same time they are throwing in some bonus features. Now unfortunately, there is no NFC with this phone, so if you do like to make mobile contactless payments using tap and pay, then you can't do that here with the TCL 30Z. But let me show you now how to access the battery and also the SIM card slot and microSD card slot. Now this phone, as I mentioned already, does feature a removable battery, and you can go over here to this part of the phone to pop the back off of it. So we'll do that right now. There we go. And there's the battery. So I'm not going to take the battery out right now because that will turn off the phone, of course. But in addition to that, we have the microSD card slot right there, and then the SIM card slot right there. So pretty cool that we can access the battery especially. It's very unlikely to have this happen nowadays, but I remember earlier on, like a decade ago, with Android smartphones, if they really froze up, you could just pop the battery out and then you know that the phone's guaranteed to reset. So that's one benefit, and I suppose another benefit would be the possibility of getting a second battery so that you could replace them throughout the day. Maybe you have two other batteries, and technically by doing that, you could triple the phone's battery life. So that's kind of interesting as well. But in general, I do wish that we had more options as far as smartphones with removable batteries. Now taking a closer look at the hardware of the device, I already talked quite a bit about the front panel here, but we do have pretty thick bezels, and we do have a water drop notch up there, and we especially have a thick bottom bezel. Now on the left side of the phone, we have nothing. On the right side of the phone, we have volume up, volume down, and the power button. And then up top here, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, we have the microphone, speaker, and a micro USB port for charging and data transfer. Now that's another thing that's very disappointing with this phone, is that it does feature micro USB. At this point in 2022, I feel like there's pretty much no reason to have micro USB for a smartphone, and unfortunately, we do have that here. And then on the back of the device, we have the camera, also the flash, TCL logo, and then for this device at least, we have a Cricket logo on the back of it. Now this material does kind of pick up some fingerprints, but I do like it. It's definitely pretty durable and feels of decent quality. So despite this phone being so inexpensive, it definitely doesn't feel necessarily that cheap. It doesn't feel high-end for that matter either, but it certainly doesn't feel like it would just fall apart. So it's probably about as durable as they could make it, given that it's very affordable. Now, if you get this phone through TracFone, then the box definitely will be different, but if you get it through Cricket, I'll show you what all comes included here. But opening up the box, we have a USB wall adapter with TCL branding on it. We also have a micro USB cable for charging and data transfer, and we have a quick start guide for the device. So we definitely get everything needed to get started. Now, as far as getting a case for this device, that might be a good idea. I don't think this phone is necessarily going to be that durable as time goes on, especially considering that it is made completely out of plastic. And of course, since it is a lower end phone, I'm sure that they didn't necessarily give it the durability that they would give a more higher end device. But let's now take a look at some camera samples from the TCL 30Z. Now in general, I wasn't really that impressed with the cameras on the TCL 30Z. However, considering that this phone is so affordable, we should at least be grateful that the phone even has cameras. So for that matter, I suppose it's fine. But if you are going to buy this phone to take pictures while you're on a vacation, for example, I think you might be disappointed with the overall quality. The cameras on here definitely do the bare minimum. I have seen worse, of course, but again, if you are into mobile photography, even at the slightest, I feel like you probably should get something a little bit higher end, but I'll let the quality speak for itself. I did take these photos on a very bright and sunny day, so another thing that the camera kind of had trouble with was covering both lighter and darker areas in the same photo. So for example, if there's one half of the picture that has shade and the other half has sunlight, it does really struggle to kind of balance that out. So keep that in mind too. But again, for a phone that's just $30, there's really not too much that I can really ask for as far as the cameras go. But let's now take a look at some video samples from the phone. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a front-facing test video from the TCL 30Z. Definitely curious to know what you think about the video and audio quality. And here's a video using the rear camera on the TCL 30Z. And we do have autofocus in video mode. It is pretty slow though, so keep that in mind. Included here in the box. So here is the box, A72. Here's a picture of the actual phone itself. Now this device is actually pretty decent for watching video content for two reasons. The first thing is the speakers do get a bit louder than I expected and are a bit clearer than expected as well. Now certainly they're not nearly as loud as what you'd expect from pretty much any phone more expensive than this one, but it does at least work well enough where you can sit back, relax, and watch some video content. Now also, having a large display like this at 6.1 inches makes it really good for watching video as well. And I guess in addition to that, the display does have pretty good colors for a lower end phone, so videos also look pretty good on here too. Now you can crop in as well, so you can get a more immersive video viewing experience. But in general, this is a pretty good media consumption device. Now of course as well, you can also plug into the headphone jack on the phone, or you can also pair it up to a Bluetooth speaker or Bluetooth headphones. So in general, I think you can definitely get around the speakers not necessarily being that loud, but again, it's at least loud enough to get the job done. Now this phone only has one speaker, and it's this speaker right here. The other speaker for the earpiece is only used when you're doing phone calls. So unlike some higher end devices like the Galaxy S22 Ultra or the iPhone 13, you don't get audio coming out of both the main speaker and also the earpiece when watching video content or listening to music, so definitely keep that in mind. But again, for what it is, it does get the job done. So in conclusion, I feel like most people probably will want a more capable Android device than this one. However, if you really don't have much that you're willing to spend on a smartphone, then at least this one does get the job done and you'll be able to get by. But if you do end up getting it and you're expecting to use it pretty often and you want to download a bunch of different apps and all that stuff, then you might want to just get this as a temporary phone and then get something better when you eventually are willing to pay more for another device. So keep that in mind, but again, at least the phone does work and it can get the job done, at least for a little while, but I can't imagine using this phone for multiple years or anything like that. But I don't think that's necessarily what this phone was designed for either, so that's certainly worth keeping in mind. But I hope you enjoyed my review of the TCL 30Z. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. But this is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next video.